Every dog owner fears the day their dog runs off. For me, living in a small, rural town, it was a break-in. Some idiot high on narcotics and desperate for more drug money to feed his high. He smashed through our living room window, blundering right into my dog, Roscoe. Roscoe's a fully grown German Shepherd and doesn't take too kindly to intruders. By the time me and my wife had gotten downstairs, the man had stolen a purse and made off with more than a few injuries. The biggest problem, Roscoe was still chasing him. I took my shotgun and I told my wife to stay and call the police. I then took off after the two. The three of us ran clear across my entire farm and into the adjacent bushland. One of the benefits of living in the middle of nowhere is that the nights are a lot clearer. Many a night have I spent gazing at the stars, committing to walks in the bright moonlight. Tonight was not one of those nights. One of the downsides of living in the middle of nowhere is that when a new moon strikes with clouds in the sky, you can't see a damn thing. In my haste, I had neglected to bring a flashlight too. I had to rely on the sound of barking, running, and snapping twigs to get by. It was not enough. Pretty soon, I had stumbled my way into being lost with only a vague direction to continue my pursuit. It was then I started to hear something else. An ever so faint, repeating click echoing through the trees. All the animals that made that kind of noise should have been asleep, and it was far too deep and powerful to be a bat. The sound was concerning, but nothing compared to what I heard next. Roscoe's barking started coming from two directions. It was unmistakably his voice, both of them, but one was moving fast. Even with the trees in the way, I could tell this thing was moving at least as fast as a fully grown elk running through an open field. Roscoe started to respond, and after a quick back and forth, the panicked intruder started to catch on. I can't even imagine what his cooked out brain was thinking at the time. 2 dogs? After a botched robbery? It was no surprise when he began to shout profanities. But those profanities were cut off almost immediately. There was no scream, just a crack and silence. My dog had a very different reaction. His aggressive barks had turned fearful, but Roscoe too went quiet after a yelp and a thud. As for me, I was angry. I didn't know what the hell was going on, but I did know that something hit my dog. It didn't matter if it was an animal out for a late night snack or a bloody bunyip. I was going to pump that sucker full of lead and get Roscoe out of there. I burst onto the scene, screaming obscenities and threats that would have made my local church bar me from entry. No bodies, no sign of life, nothing but a giant splatter of blood covering an entire tree trunk. I continued. In hindsight, I must have looked like a chicken with its head cut off, with how furiously and randomly I was bounding around. But I was on a mission, and there wasn't anything that was going to stop me. Or so I had thought. The thing must have been at least 12 feet tall. 6 massive clawed limbs, 2 legs, and 4 arms. An exoskeleton as white as snow, and a singular, massive eye as black as the night. Organs of unknown purpose were embedded into the horn-like growths on the side of its head. A mesh of flesh that made me want to vomit. Trypophobia, I think the term is. Right below it was a big maw of needle-like teeth. Yeah, I froze. And so too did it. And then I decided that blowing this demon spawn's head off was probably the right play. Nothing on this earth moves so fast. My trigger finger had barely twitched before this thing had jumped into the trees. I discharged at a bunch of leaves, then tried to pin the thing down. I think the most frightening thing about this encounter was the lack of sound. I have absolutely no idea how something that big could whirl between the trees and barely even bend them. It was like I was trying to shoot a ghost. I swear I'd unloaded my buckshot straight into its chest. The thing had landed behind me and I turned around. Damn thing didn't even flinch. I knew then that all this was theatrics. I couldn't do anything to it, yet it could do everything to me. There's no other feeling like being that powerless. But I didn't get to feel fear for very long. I turned to run, and everything went black. When I came to, it was to the smell of wet dog. Roscoe was cuddled up right next to me, looking like he'd taken a dip in a lake. I threw my arms around him. He licked my face, and then we took a look around the cave we'd found ourselves in. The first thing I took note of was the thief, or at least what remained of him. Blood covered the stone slab he'd been placed on. His right leg and arm, along with a good portion of his torso, had been ripped clean off. The severed limbs had been placed back in their correct orientations, as if there'd been some attempt to piece him back together. But the man was clearly dead. I can only hope it was instant. I guess it probably was. The second thing, of course, was the alien. I can't for the life of me figure out why, but it was hanging above me. Its body spread out over the entire cave ceiling. With the daylight now pouring in, I could see that it was facing down, watching me, without a hint of motion on its end. We just laid there, myself on the ground, and it on the ceiling, staring at each other for what had to be at least 10 minutes. I got a good look at the thing in that time. One of the most striking features of this thing was its shell carvings. I couldn't see them in the panicked state I'd been in, but now the alien symbols and pictographs were laid bare. There were two that stuck out to me. One of an alien in ceremonial robes anointing another of its kind in a backdrop of blazing fire. The other, a human riding on a dog the size of a horse and toting a lever-action shotgun. I was lost for words. After an eternity of wondering if the thing was conducting some alien mating ritual, it finally moved from its statue-like state. Its mouth said something, a long sentence. I could only make out a few words, though. The bargain, death, heresy. The kind of words that can shake a man to his very soul. Far from reassuring. What confused me more, however, is that there were clearly other human languages dotted throughout. I could tell this thing spoke with a confident fluency, but what he was saying, it was like a patchwork of foreign and understandable words. Variable word spam, if you will. I just asked what the hell it was in return. After a bit of back and forth, the alien caught on to what I was saying, and, in a perfect mimicry of my own voice, mused about me, only using one aspect of human common. It then apologized for the thief's death, stating that it was used to humans being more sturdy. I had no idea what to say, but it didn't seem to want me to say anything. It slowly climbed back down from its perch, never breaking eye contact as it did so. The alien cleared up who the intruder had been, clearly making sure he hadn't been a friend of mine, before asking me a favor. Keep people from snooping around. Apparently, it had deduced I was just some random Joe and didn't see a point in being hostile. It would let me go as long as I promised to dissuade people from poking about its territory whilst it got acclimatized to old Earth. Yeah, that's what it said. Old Earth. Seeing no other option, and wholly incentivized to not let anyone near this thing, I agreed. The alien then reached across the cave with its long arms, picking up my wife's purse from behind the stone slab. I noticed it was speckled with blood and dirt, and it was dropped into my lap. Roscoe smelled it, seemingly not even bothered by the giant in front of us. The spectre said that it had been told a long time ago that warm water and dish soap would do the trick. Then, it sent me on my way. When I got back, I learned pretty fast that a good 9 hours had passed since I'd run off into the bush. I made up some story about getting into a tussle with a late-night animal. My wife knew better, of course. That woman could always tell when I was lying. I just don't know how to tell her that there is an alien in the bush. I'd sound nuts. It's really put a healthy dose of concern in her mind, and now I can't get away from the questions. Roscoe, of course, is going on like nothing happened. You'd think with someone breaking into our home, he might be a bit more alert. But no, he's completely aloof to an unnatural degree. And the bag. Oh, the bag. I washed that thing, wanting to do it personally, partly as an apology to my wife. But it had a note inside. Call me heresy. It was scrawled in perfect cursive. Now, when I look out into that dark bushland, I can't help but feel like heresy is staring back at me. I've got every question in the world, yet no answers. If I try and bring this information to anyone official, I'll surely be labelled as crazy. If they believe me, they get ripped to shreds before I meet the same fate. So tell me, what the actual hell am I supposed to do here?